based on the answer that we obtained from the people, C5. So for bit 3, just based on this answer, this is the table that we obtained, just for A1, B3, C5, just for this particular question. And we had 23 rows. Of this, we know that for this condition it has to be higher than 3. For this, lower than 2, and for this has to be true. For the one. So we can run an algorithm, and now we have only, of all these compounds, of all these 23 compounds, only 3 compounds fit those categories.
So now we need to understand how important they are for the person.
Yeah, exactly. Now from these 3 compounds, we can see which products contain this compound. This is just a test. Which product contain this compound? Every product they contain this compound, and what else do they contain?
And then we need to figure out what else those things do, right? Because they are neutral or fine, because they're not altering anything on the cellular room.
But the first thing is what they match. They focus on what they match. Once we have that answer, then we can go to the what they don't match, the extra product that they have. What is the correlation with those 2 products? That's the next part. But from this we can select based on that. So that's what I need, that string again. I need to picture again all those variables that we were working on. And now I can once we have this code, we can enter the mock product, the very good and see.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's
I'm working on that and see what happens.
I created an area in the that for a particular type of responses. Because they can be like universally bad. But I created something that's bad for this particular person with this condition. So
This is
when I'm ready to enter those products,
Did you guys want to do the KPI session after, or did you want to schedule a separate time to do it? Harvey?
Oh my
I think
God.
we can do it after.
You guys want to do it
Yeah, we
after
can
that?
do super quick because we pretty much know what we need to do next.
Yeah, it was just a lot of like checking in for the KPIs, see if they're good, and then like planning for the next one.
Okay.
And then
Now we
adjustments.
can
Yeah,
do right
there's
after.
no-
Thank you. While we wait, we can do our stuff.
And this table that has the products, every product and all the ingredients of those products.
Yes.
What is this that below? I had a lot of information below. What is that?
This is so
Like this 20 minutes
so
so
pumped.
Do you remember what you had? This information below the table. What is all this? Do you know?
What?
Is this important or
It's hard.
because these are the products and their ingredients. I understand this part.
Yeah.
But then I have this gray line
No styrofoam.
and all this additional information at the bottom.
Oh, yeah. So I believe the first ones are the ones. So these are the new ones for the second release. And the first one above the line is what we are using now, and the rest are.
Oh, these are so I don't need to care about this for now.
Don't worry about this, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
I need to see which ones we have. So we only have for the first test we have 6.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and the rest are for the second release.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to
Switch and
copy
copy.
Yeah, just the first. Yeah, just the first one above the line. You didn't run for this one.
No, I did not.
How long did you stay last night?
We were at La Fabrica. Well, we left pretty quickly after we chit-chatted. Then we went to Scorpion.
I did not
So we went to Scorpion right here.
Oh, right here?
Yeah, so we just partied until like 3 a.m.
Oh, nice.
I'm so tired.
Yeah, me too, because I stayed there until almost 11 something, and then we went to another place until 1:30.
In Cambridge?
In Cambridge, in the same area. Another place is called Havana.
Havana, yes, yeah. I heard they have really good salsa there.
It was good.
Is that the one on the second floor where you dance?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's red because it's
Awesome.
It was good. It was good last night.
Yeah, it was a really good time. The band was amazing.
The band was amazing. The band was very good. They had live band in La Fabrica every week. And it's nice to go and have some food, have some drinks, go to your friends, but the band is very good. Last night, it's a little venue. They had a 10 people band. There were 10 people in that band.
There's so many different instruments. There's like trumpets, like the drums, and
Yeah.
like guitars and basses and stuff.
But But the venue is no bigger than this office. This room combined is just tiny. I don't know how this will. I need to go one day here.
All right, we'll get started.
Cool.
Welcome back, everyone. Hope everyone had an enjoyable lunch. Wanted to do a reveal in front of the entire group. The shirts. Some people saw them, some people didn't. This is huge, so they'd be fixed in the wash. But boom!
It's very nice.
This is the Boston specific one, for obvious reasons.
Nice.
And then there's a different one, different version. This one's just going to be the in general.
Oh, nice. I like this one.
This will be the brand. The brand will barely be like
Yeah,
just this. Yeah. So it'll be cool. It'll be cool.
Can I take a picture of you?
What's that?
Can I take a picture of you to talk about the new?
It's a little more orange than I like. I was really hoping for like a gold
I
color.
can start getting box.
Yeah, I found the
Look at those red.
unordered lights with the patchwork.
Am I the way?
You're fine.
Really, you want to join?
It's the same one where the wedding names are. So I just copied this list and
She told me the other day.
Last week.
Yeah. Is that the new lens you're using?
I think this is an old lens. I'm testing because I want to know if I should return the other lens. Get him another one. I already have this one, but it's an old version. And the new lens is $2,500. So I'm thinking about if I keep it this one,
Alright.
I will return the other one.
So as some of you can see, the topic that's on the board, company values. So today's really around like thinking about team composition. We kind of talked more about that in the previous, talking about like when you first started a company, it's mostly the co-founders, and so we're really thinking about like that kind of co-founder dynamics. You know, people who are in assumed leadership positions and have direct roles and responsibilities within the company. Now, when you hire employees, obviously there's a level removed because a lot of them are going to be, minor shareholders, whether it's like in an employee stock option pool. So like they only have like about like less than 1% at the early stage, and then that gets diluted over time. So they have, so it gets stretched out less. And obviously, after the 100th employee or that it starts being measured in basis points, which is percentages of percentages, right? So when you think about it in that way, how do you keep people motivated, right? How do you keep everyone aligned and on track and know, why are we working, right? Last week we talked a lot about the why, and there's both the personal why and there's the company why, and making sure that you arbitrate that. So when you think about hiring and recruiting for people to join your company, the company values are the why that they joined your company, right? Not just obviously everyone, paycheck, health insurance, all that good stuff, big motivator for why someone would join your company, but the beyond, right? Because obviously every company can offer that, right? Maybe compensation is different in terms of monetary value than before. You used to be able to hack and be like, hey, we have massage tables in the office. Would you want to join us as opposed to someone else? But then that starts, that only gets you up to a certain point because there are just values within the company that either make someone stay, either make someone want to work above and beyond. And in the early stage, it's incredibly important. Like I often say, what separates, founders and good founders is that willingness to go above and beyond, right? What is normally required of like a 9 to 5, right? And so when we think about it in that way, like, what do you think is like the base foundation of what company values should be? Like, think about that for a moment. Like, what literally, and there's so much to choose from, right? Innovation, okay. Yeah.
The alignment of core beliefs.
The what?
Alignment of core beliefs.
Alignment of core beliefs. Okay. Well, I would probably say like when we like it would probably be like one more down, right? Like Yeah, love the problem, right? So, yeah, so like there's probably like some core like driving force, right? That everyone is like, we need to solve this, right? So solution oriented, right? And then like there's some form of belief for the future. So maybe there's like a vision for the future that a lot of people have. And then innovation, like just wanting to improve what exists, right? Or create some new open space.
Yeah.
So obviously those are different ways of like thinking about what are the values beyond that. So how would you communicate these values to someone? Whether it be an investor, business partner, or someone else. And I think there's two forms, right? There's more subtler ways of transferring your values, and then there's explicit, right? An employee, maybe you're allowed to be explicit. A business partner or an investor, maybe they go onto your website and they see that there is a general theme that this company exudes, right? And so on and so forth. So, you know, thinking about like there's this kind of passive way that you drive at your values and a more active way. Well, let's start with passive. What would be passive ways of you kind of discussing and providing, you know, your company values to others?
Vision.
Vision. So how so?
Like if you convey the vision, what actually is the vision of the company, and
Okay.
it's more of like a bigger ecosystem kind of vision.
Mhm.
They understand that okay, the values will be like for me like it's continuous innovation and expanding to multiple domains within the industry. So
And how do you deliver that to someone in a passive way?
in passive way, like for instance, if let's take our startup, so
Mhm.
snow sport simulator. So like the vision is to make it make snow sports accessible to anyone within their neighborhood. So by that it's
So that's like a very active way, right? Like
Okay.
you telling someone that is your value.
Could be like, for example, the logo and the catchphrase, the company passive way to
Sure.
bring that.
So a motto,
yeah
right? Maybe a more active, more explicit way would be a mission statement, right? That you have every company read or every new employee read, right? Also, a passive way is just incorporating like parts of the mission statement into your marketing, right? Into your branding, and just having core tenets, right? That you say, our company believes in this, our company believes in this, our company believes in this, so that when you go out and you create an advertisement, you create a, you know, piece of content online, you put copy on a website, the language reinforces that, and it's a really good passive way of kind of delivering what your company values are to others. So
Through your products, through hiring as well.
there's what's there?
Through like hiring and team building.
Yeah.
If you're saying that your values are diversity,
Mm-hmm.
you should have people of
Sure.
diverse backgrounds
Yes.
in your team, and you.
It's a reflection,
Yeah, it's a
right?
reflection of
Yeah.
values.
So you're people. And that if people truly believe in this, and obviously this is something that like you interview and you try to figure out, right? Does it come naturally to them, these certain values, right?
Yeah.
Because then they're more willing to use it in their, you know, day-to-day parlance, you know, when they're talking, their parlance, you know, how they communicate with others on the team, when they bring on someone new, right? Are they able to say, oh, this person actually, they don't fit our values, and so you actually are able to fire fast. They're not like embedded into your company after like 6 months, and then it's
Yeah.
harder to remove them, right? Because if everyone knows what the values are, they're like, oh, that person's, you know, like not cool. They don't fit our values. We can filter.
Reflections through
Yeah.
actions is more subtle or more active, more passive, more active. Reflections through actions. We said we're going to do have diversity, and we have diversity. So reflections through actions. Is that passive or active?
Both, right? Because it's just a natural thing that people will observe over time, right? So that's passive, right? And how you conduct your marketing, right? That showcases that thing. then obviously that's something that the people will take note of, right? But then there are very active measures, right? Like going out and recruiting in a specific area, or like doing more applications, or being attentive to those types of things, right? That's more active, right? What type of things, right? So we were talking about like innovation, problem oriented. There are probably like adjectives that can be used as values. There are anecdotes, right? Like problem, like a story about a problem being a part of values, right? And so when we kind of think about that, what would be like a couple things that you would say at like a general level would fit under the would be tenets under company values?
So what other things are considered values? We say innovation, goals was not that clear to be value. What other things are considered values? You said
Values.
innovation.
So we're trying to discuss it right now.
Okay.
What are things that are considered values, right? So like innovation, maybe like a way that we're doing work, right? And so we have company values that are related to how we do work, but there might be values in other areas too. And so we just open it up for discussion. What do people think? Like,
What do we stand for as a
what do you
company?
stand for?
What's our,
The
that-
core, those are the core goals,
Mhm.
right?
yeah.
The
So
core
what
goals.
matters to us?
What matters?
What are we not going to budge regardless of whatever
Budget,
happens?
So like in our what our company results are going to look like, right? How and going back to how we conduct business, right? And what we expect from other people, right? So
Is it like shit, sorry, go ahead.
No. So I think like there's a bunch of other things too, right? Like company values, like we talked about like innovation, which is very much like a very numbers oriented thing, right? So we value like innovation, thinking outside of the box, right? That's a very like more of a business oriented company value. And then we talked about diversity over here, which is more of like a moral type of standing, right? More moral values that we have, right? So we have very business focused things. We have morally related stuff. Do you think that there are any more that might fit under that?
I think last time we talked about how founders are entrepreneurial.
Mm-hmm.
I think first hires should also have that like entrepreneurship kind of thing where they have like an internal motivation to work.
So motivation might be like a value,
Mm.
right? And that might fit under like how do we work, right?
Social impact.
Social impact, okay.
A lot of people join a company just for social impact, like they want to create a change or something.
And that might be under like morals,
And also
Morals,
culture.
yes.
culture.
I think
okay.
culture is like in between business and morals. I think it's somewhere
Uh-huh.
here. How we
Yeah.
do all those things. Like
Yeah.
how do we achieve business results? How do we remain moral, normal people?
Interesting,
How-
right?
Yeah, how do we define, for example, transparency of the companies of how do they, 1 million of the employees is like, you work for a company, you get a salary, but you know that you're offered this salary and the company is making this much. Then the next year the company did make this much, but you're still here. The company make this much, you're still here. And they give you a little bonus that goes here. So what is the value of the company to say, hey, wait a minute, if we make more, you're going to make more. We're going to make sure that you are rewarded for this. I don't know how you do something. In the United States, it's not like that. For example, in my country, there is a law that if the company makes a certain amount of profit, they have to share that profit with employees, a portion of that, before they can say, we make. Well, I don't really understand the terminology there, but you have to say that yes, the company makes some profit, but you cannot talk about those until you share a portion with employees. And that I think is another important value that employees feel that they are not just making somebody, because we don't. This is our goal to that we don't want to work for somebody else, to build somebody else's dreams. We want to build our own dreams, but then we want to hire people to build our dreams. then there will be.
Well, I think that's a good conversation because I think
they
like
also,
one of the things is
Yeah.
some of the best companies, the employees, that is their dream. It's not
Yeah,
the
they're
founders,
invested in the
right?
dream, true.
They are invested in the dream, and so the company values is just the articulation of maybe some more of the details of what the broader vision is, right? I think just intrinsic to how a lot of founders think, we're very in the problem. We are in the solution. So like communicating what our vision is for the literal future is something that we often do. But maybe something that falls a little bit by the wayside is how do we get there? What do we anticipate the world being like around that, right? And so, whether it's very business focused, like making sure that like we innovate and we are not, stuck in our ways type of thing, right? We don't just, it's like a big engineering thing, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of mechanical engineers that I talk to, they're like, well, why would we do this? Nobody does this. And I'm like, okay, the reason that nobody is doing this is not a reason for us not to try to do something, right? Because again, if it is a potential solution, then let's try it, right? That's a company value that you can instill, that we're willing to go try stuff, right? That might sound, crazy, or for the majority of cases, just something that people don't actively do, right? We've got to be scrappy. Scrappy is like a big company value, right? Like, it's not like if something costs $5 to do, we're not going to spend $100 doing it just because we can. Because then obviously that number just gets bigger and bigger over time. Oh, like, what's the cost of, this software product? Oh, $5,000. Here we go. When, I'll just, there's this other solution that's like $10, right? But $5,000, here you go, right? Like, it's a company culture thing, company values that you have, being frugal or being scrappy, right?
Yep.
That you can instill within your company. And when Yulia was talking before about like company culture, the values create the culture that you have around there. When everyone's scrappy, when someone's just like, oh yeah, we'll just spend $5,000 on something, for other team members to be like, maybe there's something cheaper, right? Or some easier way for us to do it, right? That's free, for example, right? And as business owners, we love to hear that teammates are innovating in that. I think like when we talk about like making sure that employees have not just like kind of vision buy-in, but also like financial buy-in, right? That's when the employee stock option comes in, right? That's when, being able to have a company value of, hey, aspire as individuals, work as a team. It's a common like catchphrase within business, right? Where it's like, hey, we need to all work together, but I recognize you have personal aspirations. So one person might be motivated on money. So we need to have like a, salary ramp in place for this particular person. This other person, they're younger, they can take more risk. So they're going to take more stock, but like have like a lower salary because they are more able to risk, and you have that open to them, right? Or some of them are very motivated by job title, and you say, okay, in where you are right now, if you work really hard and we recognize your potential, you'll get to this position and this position because that's what they're motivated by. And so this just goes to like being able to instill like strong company culture, strong company values that help contribute to that, so that you know how to deal with each particular person. And when they go to the company, right, your team members feel like that sticks out. That person, that business partner, that investor doesn't fit with what we're doing because it's been clearly defined what is us, right? Do company values change over time?
Yeah.
Potentially, right?
Potentially,
Not all.
Yeah.
not
all of them.
The core, I
The
don't
core?
think the core should not change because then the company change.
Mhm.
What is at the core? The initial goals. If they change, the company changes. So you cannot say the same
I mean,
company.
yeah, the product can change, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that the culture should change or
Yeah.
that people should have a different stance on issues that are important.
Because then you can say this is a different company. It's not the same company, right?
Exactly.
But usually the core values of a company are very generic and vague. It's like honesty, integrity, culture, this and that. So like,
And is that just because the person who defined them made them vague?
Probably.
Or could you just be very specific?
I feel like
about
it's
the goal?
intentionally vague.
Yeah, but some of the values is the goals, the actual goal that you want to achieve.
The goal can be anything, or it could,
Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
my
the
point.
goal
goal can change. So it basically the core values are.
That's true.
I'm just saying it's
Yeah.
intentionally vague so that like if the front end changes, the back end also changes.
Right. For example,
Yeah.
like with what you all are doing with this snow
Yeah.
sports, right? If one of your core brand tenets is democratization, we want to open up snow sports to more people, right?
Yeah.
That could be one of your core tenets, democratizing snow sports, right?
Yeah.
But then what if you guys expanded to
Yes.
something else? So then the core values becomes democratization of sports in general, right? So
Yes.
maybe some things may change, right? Maybe the spirit stays the same. Maybe the spirit has to change. I think that the biggest thing, and I think you're going to hear me constantly say this, is it's at the early stage, it's what makes you feel good, right? You and your team feel good and make sure that you're aligned. Over time, when you have employees, it's a conscious decision by the entire company, right? And in some cases, right, not being intentional about it and not like iterating through it can lead to issues, right? For example, like in Google, the lot of like employees at Google really like to have a say in their company values. Less so in other companies. It's just how leadership predicates it onto their employees, right? And so, you know, Apple's design tenets, Apple employees don't really have as much of a say because it's top-down driven. Google builds a very collaborative culture, so thus employees feel empowered to have a say in what Google's brands are. And there can be like company revolts, and there can be like whenever someone wants to change something, right?
Yeah.
It all goes down to like partially your strategy and how you operate, right? Because maybe sometimes you want like that kumbaya collaborative environment, but then that might lead you into some trouble. The other way, if you are dictatorial and you provide top-down dictates, right? But then everyone just follows you and nobody thinks for themselves, and that can also lead to problems, right? So there's always nuances in that. I think that thinking about like flexibility and how you think about it, and having both leadership being able to remember a bit of like, you know, the foundation and the legacy that goes on, but also like being able to be flexible and react to changes, both with what employees may think and then what leadership knows from like business objectives needs to happen, right? And it's always like a twist pull on that and how your company culture allows you that.
Interesting. I've seen at one company where values were communicated in one way to everybody, including the team, but were not followed internally. So that creates a horrible dynamic
Yeah.
where you know that we have these values that we all aspire to be part of and communicate and convey, but then the leadership, they just, they dismantle them left and right.
Mhm.
So how do you avoid that? How do you avoid people not caring about values and just not, whenever a situation is inconvenient, they always bend the values to achieve business results? I think it's really
Yeah.
important that this doesn't happen. So how do you stay strong?
I think that one of the ways that you can do that is like in our KPI session planning, right? When you create those kind of points of judgment for employees, being cognizant of that and allowing for employees to communicate up front. For example, like if you were to say like, hey, we want everything to be like a core brand tenant might be measure twice, cut once. That could be a tenant, right? That's a little cliche, but like, you know, something along those lines of like, we want to be very diligent in what we do. But then, you know, if you provided a directive to an employee to like, we need you to ship this thing tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, that goes against then it's company culture to then say, to empower the employee to say, oh, you told me, right, that you want to do this, right? So, like, I personally need 2 weeks to do this, not tomorrow. It's part of culture to then enforce the values so that employees feel empowered enough to provide those details, right? On the other hand, right, that's when the flexibility comes back in, right? Because look, maybe a client is like, we need this thing done tomorrow. And then it's like, okay, do we compromise on that? Do we have enough flexibility? Do we have enough of an understanding? Because, you know, like in what you're saying, it's like Pandora's box gets opened. You can't close it. As soon as one person does that, right, all of your executives see that. They can do the same thing. So it's a leadership thing, right, to apply the values, and it's discipline for yourself to be able to do that, right? And it's hard. I totally admit it. But like, whether it's you going to the client and saying, sorry, we're just not going to take this business then because we're not going to be able to provide a good enough service, and you know, our team says it'll take 2 weeks, we can't get it to you tomorrow. That's not compromising on your company values, and it's a leadership thing, right? But sometimes you might be like, look, our business is going to close down if we don't secure this business. It's a leadership decision, right? So it might not, I don't think generally it's not on the employees. It's generally on, like, because the employees are just reacting to the way that they're judged, right? If your KPI says they need to get something done by this point, and that goes against their values because the values say, let's make sure that we do this right the first time and not go back and fix it. Okay, well, you didn't give them enough time, and they didn't feel empowered enough to have that dialogue, right? And that might be another like company value, right? Like the willingness to push back against like unreasonable requests, right? You might say like, we want to have a company value around reasonable requests. That might be a company value. And it's good from like a business partner perspective because when you put that out, we have an expectation from our employees and from our leadership to provide reasonable requests. Well, then it makes a business partner feel bad when they're making, you know, a not reasonable request, right? But like, you know, that brand tenet of like not making sure that everything is reasonable, and if it's not, communicate. Communication is another like potential like company value, right? Where it's like make sure that we have clear and open, transparent lines of communication. We are all here working in a professional environment. We're, you know, like let's keep communication professional so that when we push back, it's not personal, right? I'm telling my employee to work better, not because I have personal enmity against them. It's because I need to get better, right? Company values, right? And as long as you stick to it, that's when the results happen. Cool. Anything else?
As an early stage startup, how much should we care about company values?
Okay, I was going to move on, but no, this is a good point to make. So there are personal values that we all live by. Do we ever say that as a child, right? Is there a certain point where people's values start kicking in? Like when you're a child, is there a certain age where you're like, oh, this kid needs to be an upstanding moral person? Or do you try to do that right away at birth?
Little by little. I mean, little by little. Not everything.
Little by little.
They won't have an opinion of their own unless they are trained to go into a certain direction.
You could teach them like as they're growing, like say thank you every time you meet someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at some point you can tell a person, call
Mhm.
and that will,
Don't lie.
and that will not change
Don't
for the
talk
rest
back.
of the life.
Like there are things that like
Yeah.
people teach a child, right, at some point. But that's someone's opinion on something else because the thing isn't able to make an opinion of it on its own, right? So as a baby, don't throw food is something that we take because we don't want to be wasteful. We don't want to, be disrespectful to someone else. These are values that we instill upon someone else. And if you think about your business as being like the child that is slowly growing up over time, there's obviously, right, at the early stage, values that you enforce upon it. At some point, when the business gets old enough, it will come to its own conclusions about values. And if it's been parented well, the parent values will continue on into adulthood, right? If it's something that's agreed upon. There might be rebellious moments. There might, it's just like regular kids, right? Regular people. I think you need to see it in that way. You as the founders are taking care of something that's new. Literally blank slate. If you teach it the right way from the get, then it will grow up and have those values, right? If you don't, it's going to figure out its own values. You may or may not like that. But your business comes back and it has a bunch of tattoos and, is drinking at, 14 and, all that stuff, right? So, if you want to consider yourself the parents of your business, right? Whatever analogy you need, I think that's how I look at it, right? You're taking care of your business. If you don't enforce values on it, then you have no control over it, right? And then when it starts developing its own culture, its own values, you're gonna have to untrain it, and it's a very painful process. It's like untraining a person, because you're like, stop picking your nose, stop, stop farting in public, whatever, right? It's like, oh, you gotta train it out of a person. Think about how hard it would be to train someone normally. Now imagine doing that in a business, hundreds of employees, all of them arguing with each other because we didn't institute strong conversations about everyone's going to talk professionally, everyone's going to treat each other, professionally, nothing's taken personal, there aren't fist fights in the company because no one decided to tell everyone about that, right? So, it's important. Because then these things come later on when you're like, crap, our culture is garbage. Everyone's out for themselves. It's like everyone's backstabbing each other and everyone's jockeying to talk to the CEO so they get a promotion. It sucks. Let's take some accountability. You didn't institute a good company culture. You didn't institute what values your company stand by, what is appropriate. When I started the Accelerator program right at the start, what did I start with? Code of conduct, right? And our values, respect, integrity, and honor. Those are the Accelerator, core values, if you will. General, right? Respect, integrity, honor. When we do actions, maybe those words echo in your head. Just maybe, right? Just like when you go out and you're like, it's bad if I steal something. Because it's an instilled value in you. Stealing's bad. It's dishonest. It's something that might ring in your head when the moment comes. The more you kind of instill it, the more it becomes like second nature. It becomes like muscle memory, right? Let's be diligent about stuff. Let's be fast and reactive because we can fix it later. Okay, speed over everything. That's a company value that you instill, right? So when someone asks the question, oh, should we do this or this? Speed over everything. Automatic answer, right? Okay, let's choose the fast way. Because we can fix it later.
So the code.
Or you're in healthcare, you can't do that, right? So obviously, let's be a little bit more diligent. Okay, let's make sure that we have the right answer the first time. That type of thing.
Or they're building planes that are in a major trouble
Yeah.
right now.
Yes.
Steve Nobel.
Yeah. Oh, should we add a cliff option into our snowboard industry? The floor opens up and they fall in. I don't know. but you know, so.
But then we forget to add like, don't put near the window.
No, and I think a good like follow up point to that, right, is like working at a company. You got to do things that are a little bit cliche and like a little cringe in a way, because sometimes you might want to like beat it into people, right, and keep bringing it up, right. You're like, hey, let's be diligent about this. And you might repeat that over and over and over again. And people start making fun of you because you're the diligent person. But when the time comes, that stressful moment, and they're like, I got option A or option B. Which one am I going to choose? The diligent option. Cool, right? Because you're just like, there's so many snap judgment moments, right? And the more that you reinforce and pound in those values, the more it gets in. Cool. Anything else?
So the code of conduct is an active way to transmit the value.
Yes, it is an active way, right? And that's more for very punitive related things, right? Like, do not do these things because we will literally get fired, right? That is a very active way of like discussing those things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like, look, and like, they're very like, because some of it can be seen as like red tape, right? But like, you know, because like you don't want to apply like, you know, standard operating procedures for everything. So you might not prescribe. That's why like a lot of things are sometimes described at a general level to allow for a little bit of flexibility. But as long as, you know, it's broadly understood the meaning behind certain things and the conjunction of different values. That's why it's like crafting really good company values is like a superpower for some companies, right? Because when you look at a certain company, you're like, I know what that company's values are all about. Good and bad, right? Like Tesla has a certain brand. X now has a certain brand, right? Their company values have been oriented in a particular way. Amazon has their own company values that you can tell, right? Google, Microsoft, they all have that. It's how people interpret what these companies are about. And for you, that's all you're going to have, right? You don't have a long legacy. You don't have a long history. All people know about is what you're about. Cool. Awesome. So maybe we'll could do a workshop about company values where you actually write it down and start working on it. We can do that for the next 15 minutes or so. Pause the recording, and then we go that, spend like a couple minutes like going through, and like, you know, it'd be good to like share different values, because you might hear someone from someone else and be like, I'd like to pick that too. So I think that's a good thing. So why don't we disperse, start thinking about that, you know, maybe what are our core tenets? Like you saw how we had 3 distinct ones: respect, integrity, honor. And then we had like sub things. And we were very descriptive about it because it's a code of conduct, right? But you can be a little bit more general. You can be more, you know, I would probably stray away from being too specific, right? But, you know, being able to say like, okay, should we choose A or option B? Which one? Honor. Which one's the honorable one? Should we screw the client or not? Integrity. You know? Someone gave us a nasty review. Do we write a nasty comment back? No, we're not respectful. Right? All the time.
Every day.
Yes.
Right too.
Clap back. Get them. All right. So why don't we break and go do that, and then we'll reconvene at 12:15.
Okay.
No, sorry, 2:15. I'm in Mountain Time Zone. I'm sorry.
Ready?
We'll move on to the next topic. Cool. Recruiting co-founders. This should be a quick one. So, just thinking about it from like an operational mindset, right? Would it be like when you're recruiting co-founders, right? Other than someone literally telling you that you should have a co-founder, right? What are the reasons for having a co-founder? Because you are giving up a lot, right? Especially in the early stage, right? One co-founder, If you're just alone, one co-founder means you lose 50%. You and your partner, then you both collectively lose 33%.
Yes.
Does that mean that we should have more co-founders because then you lose less over time? No, I'm kidding. But you know, it is a big investment into another person, right? And oftentimes, right, some people might be the idea person, so they get a little bit more than others, right? It doesn't have to be a 50-50 split, right? Sometimes you recruit someone on, and then they get proportional to the work based off of where the company is at, right? And there's a website called Slicing Pie that has like a little like algorithm that they have underneath the hood, and they have a bunch of like questions, and you know, helps you slice the pie, as the name implies, right? But I mean, like for the main basic parts, right? I think it really comes along to a lot of like idea people needing a technical person to help them build said thing, right? And I think a lot of people struggle with that, and some people like they are basically done at the idea level because they can never actually build it, right? And I think one of the things to note for those business-oriented people and recruiting like technical people is that oftentimes, you know, engineers don't want to be treated as employees when they're co-founders, right? And that's the dynamic that often makes it what they feel, right? Like, I'm gonna go now work for someone else, as opposed to being partners in a business. And that's often what engineers do feel, right?
Do
They're
you
also
mean like
worried.
in a company when they are co-founder,
Yeah.
they end up reporting to the CEO? Is that the dynamic?
So that's generally the case, but I mean, like, I think like a lot of it is like buy-in, right? Like whether or not they want to. Sorry. Whether or not they want to like work on something. There's a lot of things that engineers could be working on, right? So they have to feel buy-in. So like one of the basic ways of recruiting an engineer, and look, this is kind of like a hack, right? Is like you have an idea, okay, great, but they need to have buy-in into it, right? If you tell them about an idea, they don't really have buy-in to it because it's your idea, and they're just going to be working for you, right? So often the case is what you can do is eat a little humble pie. You know that you can't do this business without them. Okay, what are we going to do? Talk to them, have the conversation, and try to nudge them into coming up with the idea with you, right? Then the engineer feels buy-in because they came up with the idea, even though you did a lot of hefty lifting to get them to come to the idea, right? And then you eat a little bit of humble pie, 50-50, you go off and do the business with the two of you as co-founders. That's the way for non-technical people to be recruited. Obviously on the engineer side, you might want to recognize sometimes when that's happening, because sometimes, you know, people will be doing this, right? And so that's just something for engineers to be cognizant of, right? You have a scarce resource, skill set that is necessary, and so, you know, like you can come up with stuff, right? You can come up with it from the opposite end, right? If an engineer wants to recruit a business person, right? The business person also needs the same amount of buy-in, right? They need to feel like this is something that they want to sell. And, yeah, so, you know, whether it's selling or whether it's marketing or whether it's just like overall buy-in, it's gotta feel like it's theirs, right? And so whether it's like discussing with someone, it's a lot more easier for an engineer to get a business person to come up with an idea that's along the same lines, right? Just because they're naturally idea people. Okay, cool. Any questions about recruiting co-founders? And I think we've talked a bit, like that's why I'm going quick with it. Talked a bit about the composition beforehand, but just like, look, it's just co-founders need to help cover up each other's deficiencies, right? And maybe that's a negative way of looking at it, but like as long as they're complementary to each other, right? And so that you know, there can be overlap. Like you're gonna have two engineers working together. You have two business people, but then it's a little hard for them to get something going. But you know, maybe one of them learns the code or something, or you know, hires someone to build something. But you know, the general case of it, right? We just gotta be able to do what the other person either doesn't want to do or can't do, right? So it's important. Cool. We are not going to do this. We already did enough talk about that. Sad conversation now. Founder breakups do happen, and they happen a lot, right? And irreconcilable differences is something that comes up a lot, right? And we need to think about how to either gracefully do it or not, right? And so, you can have it in the legal structure to deal with co-founder breakups. When you do an incorporation agreement amongst co-founders, right? The general standard is a 4-year ramp, 1-year cliff. It's the standard amongst the startup industry. What does that mean? 4-year ramp means that you gain access to the shares that you have over a 4-year period. So they vest each year. Vesting means that you have, you're allocated that amount, right? And so really, if you think about 4 years, you get a quarter of your allotted amount. If it's 50, right? So it'd be a quarter of 50% every year until you have the full amount after 4 years. Excuse me. Now it's a 4-year ramp, 1-year cliff. So what is the cliff part? If you don't work for at least a year, you don't get access to anything, right? So basically, if you walk away before 1 year, you're not entitled to anything. And in the legal, that legal structure is there so that someone doesn't help come up with the idea and sue you later on, for whatever amount of shares that they think they're entitled to. No, because you didn't end up working for a full year. That's the agreement that everyone has within the company. And look, they can still sue you because the thing about lawsuits, anybody can sue anybody. They don't have legal standing because there is no legal agreement. If you wrote a legal agreement between people, right, and they leave before that year, they don't vest anything. They're not entitled to anything. It's in the legal documents, right? And it's pretty weak grounds for someone to be like, I helped come up with an idea and all that type of stuff, right? Obviously, we're descending into legal advice. I'm not giving legal advice, but it's downside protection there to be able to write that and have it. And I have a standard incorporation agreement, but it'd be better to have it done once for one company, and then you use that for the rest of your life. Right? So whatever company it is, to subsidize it so that you have a legal document that you can use for the rest of your life. That's how I did it. You just have to change a few things depending on the certain situation, right? I will say that there are, I hate doing this because I don't often like to talk about my personal situation. I'd like it better if someone comes up with stuff, but it just happens to be the case that this is more of a learn from mistakes type of thing. It's hard to learn this from base principles. For example, I recruited 3 people who were already working on their own startup to work with me on a different thing. They had their own business, and it was basically okay, well, if you guys can help me get this across the finish line, I will give the 3 of you collectively 25%. I will deal with everything else. It did not work. They were too busy with the other thing. It was a mess. They didn't enjoy working on 2 separate things, and it was really a big problem that it felt like they were working for me and we're not partners. And they only had 25%. I had the rest. It's a major power imbalance. That doesn't work. So there's a big difference between how a lot of these structures are made, because look, it is true. You may have put in a lot more work before someone joined. You get 60, you get 40. The power dynamic's off. And then, issues start arising because I own 60%, so I should have more say. Well, now it just feels like I'm working for you. And that's may or may not be how someone, works on that type of stuff. So yeah, if you stick to the 4-year ramp, 1-year cliff, right? If someone does put in a good year of service for you, you should be compensated for it, right? In proportion to the amount that they invested, right? But also, if someone doesn't work a full year with you, that's probably beyond the honeymoon phase, right? They've been there. But if they haven't reached it, then yeah, that might just be the high of oh, this is so cool, I'm working on a startup. Oh no, this sucks. I'm out. right? And really, from a founder's perspective, try to cut as fast as possible. It's both unfair to do, to have someone who doesn't want to be there, and you can feel it and sense it, that they don't want to be here. And it's better for both sides because you need to build your business, and for the other side, get on with their lives, doing what they actually want to work on. Right? So it's important. There's no workshop with this. Just wanted to articulate, right, how to break option, one of the biggest problems within the startup industry, just because we aren't good at dealing with this. Having pre-incorporation agreements, if you haven't incorporated yet, that then become binding after incorporation, that'd be a good thing. You can have that drafted up once in your life and then carry that on forever, or you can have a post-incorporation agreement, which is just, that's actually standard and required that everyone actually come up with an incorporation agreement where everyone agrees to all the things. So funnily enough, when I did that co-founder questionnaire earlier, the legal codified thing, the incorporation agreement, is just the legal version of that co-founder questionnaire that I did. Cool. Yeah. Things have purpose, reasons. A method to the madness of why we do certain things that we do. Cool. Does anybody have any questions about founder breakups? Okay, cool.
So, you suggest to have a formal document or an informal document is fine at early stages when the company is not incorporated?
Yeah, so if it's a pre-incorporation agreement, it just says that this comes into power after we incorporate.
Yes.
Because then there's a legal entity.
Yeah.
Right? It's a legal agreement between a group of people that, when the company gets formed, we are going to agree to all of these things. And then it also lists out in the incorporation agreement, it's different than the corporation agreement because it lays out what are the things that we agreed to do beforehand, right? So, that's how can someone get fired? What happens to their shares after they get fired? An example of an incorporation agreement, even if someone passes the 1 year cliff and they invested certain amount of shares, if, for example, they get fired for cause, right? The company you can write in the the incorporation agreement, you have right of first refusal to buy their shares, liquidate their shares immediately. The company can buy them out.
Oh, okay.
At
So
the present company.
if the company doesn't buy them out, the person who gets fired, they already will have.
They have it technically, but you can have it in the incorporation agreement that all their vested shares can get liquidated upon their firing for cause or leaving. You can change it to whatever you want.
Yes.
We're all adults. We can sign it off, read it and say if I get separated from the company for whatever reason, the company gets the right of first refusal to do it, blah, right? And then removal of a co-founder requires a unanimous agreement or a majority agreement, whatever, right? Look, these are things that have to be discussed because if you don't, the breakup happens, it gets messy, right?
Yeah.
So, cool.
Do you have a boilerplate we can use for these agreements?
This is a legal document, so I can't provide a legal document for someone else to use. It would that'd be liability to the accelerator.
There's someone calling we can go.
What's that?
There's this website that's called Cooley.
No, I was just-
Cooley, yeah.
That's what everybody.
It's a law firm.
That's what everybody uses.
Yeah.
I can send the link also. I use it.
I see.
And I have a friend who uses it too.
We talked about this already. Team composition. So unless anybody has any additional questions about team composition, at least from the co-founder side, I'll then transition to talk about team composition from the first few employees' perspective. So if anybody has anything about team composition from
By composition, you mean the desired versus primary responsibility, right?
that, but also who building teams within your company, employees and how that type of stuff works.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So if anybody has any questions about co-founders, we good there? Okay. So when we think about building teams, right? So you're hiring groups of people, right? You can hire engineering, sales, marketing, so on and so forth, right? So really, when you think about like hiring that first person to then join that formal team, you might have executive leadership from it, from your co-founding team, right? If you have a CTO, they're in charge of the engineering team, right? So all you're doing is probably hiring people subordinate to them, right? But let's just say, for example, that, you don't have a person in the executive position that's going to be the head of sales, for example, but you hired a salesperson. Is it better to hire just a regular salesperson, or do you want to hire leadership?
Which timeline are you speaking of?
First employee.
The first employee?
Yeah, like you're an enterprise SaaS company. You're going to be selling to B2Bs. You're hiring your first sales hire. Would you rather hire leadership, or would you rather hire like a line employee?
I think a line employee, because
Okay.
initial stage they can also grow and become the leader once they have a bigger team. But if we hire directly a leadership guy, they don't have a team to lead.
Okay. All right, that's an interesting perspective, right? So you're saying that you want to hire someone who's going to grow into becoming a leader in the early stage? Okay. So that's an interesting point, right? So if you're just hiring one person, right, maybe you want to do that there. Let's say that you actually did raise money, so you're hiring a full team. What does that look like?
What do you mix of both?
Mix of both. Well, what does the mix look like? Let's be specific.
I'll say the first, to delegate it to the leader, because they would have knowledge on what they're doing.
I can't hear you, sorry.
The first sales employee, when you raise, I would delegate it to the leader. I would try to hire a leader.
Okay.
So then, since they have industry knowledge, and they would know what they need to do when it comes to the second employee in sales, third employee in sales.
Okay. Interesting. So you've hired that first initial salesperson that's going to grow into a salesperson. So, do they know what they're doing? Do they know what they're doing in what you need them to do? Do you know what to tell your salesperson what to do? Do you know what your sales strategy is?
Well,
do you know what the sales playbook is?
Because in the beginning, you're everything, right? So you have at least a system, and you give it to them.
Okay.
When if you have customer segment, some sort of hypothesis, at least if at early stage, salesperson can approach those customer segments. And they have some value props.
Okay.
I would say before you hire that person, somebody on your team is probably already doing sales.
Yeah,
So while they're
fine.
doing it, they're probably taking down the notes of
Yeah.
what they're doing, what the process is.
Yeah.
They may not have a strategy yet, but at least they know the steps and they can teach the
Okay.
line employee, and then you bring in the next part to like ship it.
So a lot of it is like founder-led sales, and then you're passing it down.
But the problem is like if you don't really, let's say there is a new role that you want to fill and you don't really have all the information, all the expertise in that role, and you hire somebody, that person has to have some form of leadership. Because that person will have to write some SOPs for that role. I don't know, there should be something that person is not just going to follow a recipe, that person will have to build a recipe in order to perform that job. So maybe some form of leadership, maybe, I don't know.
I think that there's been arguments for both, right? And I'm not going to use my own experience because I don't think that it's very productive to think about that way. I think that it is something that I will keep going back to, right? It is what your company culture is like. Who do you have on your founding team dictates your next steps, right? How much money you raise. It's a nuanced thing. So that's why there's not an easy one-size-fits-all answer, right? But the evaluation is if you were a heavy founder-led sales organization, sometimes you have to look at yourself and say, do I know what I'm doing? Maybe, maybe not. You just did founder-led sales because there's no one else that's doing sales. So maybe in that particular case, you're looking to hire on someone with formal sales experience to then kind of remake things, to create the playbook, to create the sales strategy, so on and so forth, and really delegate it off of you. You might deal with top of funnel, right? Like they want to talk to the CEO. Cool, I'm here to be available to it, to the client or whatever. But for the most part, I have completely said, you deal with sales. This is your silo. You are responsible for it. Honestly, I kind of work for you now at this point, right? I'm like a senior salesperson. That's what the CEO would be to like a VP of sales. That is one option, right? But what if you are that sales guru? Could be. You could develop that skill set over time, right? Then at that point, it's how you would construct the organization. You may not need a leadership person, a VP of sales. You just have a bunch of your SDRs, your sales development representatives, and they just go, and they do it. And you built the strategy and you built the thing. So that's why I think it's nuanced. It's based off of what you do. If you're a bootstrapped business that is growing one salesperson over time, right? I think that makes sense that you actually have someone that just scales you, right? It's basically cloning of you in the sales capacity, right? But maybe at some point you say, is this the most efficient way that we're currently working? The sales organization might be getting a little bit bigger, right? Okay, maybe we need to hire someone. And then if you raised a bunch of money, right, and you're like, I have 5 FTE slots to do it, do you in your personal capacity know what to do with 5 people, right? If you don't, then yes, you essentially demote yourself or hire someone above you in the specific field of that. And I think it's something that's really hard for some founders to hire someone over them because a lot of them said, I'm being a founder because I don't want anybody telling me what to do. Right? I don't want a boss. But I would change the perspective a little bit and say you're changing the responsibility, right? You have the overall business objective responsibility, but I'm delegating the implementation of sales responsibility to someone else. They report to me on the fact that they are hitting their numbers, but on how they're doing it, that's their responsibility. And I have interviewed and really been diligent in like understanding, yes, this person is able to manage that. Okay, we really focused a lot on sales there. The same thing is on engineering, right? If you have a CTO, presumably they know how to manage people. But look, some people are just engineers. They're great at building stuff. Managing other people to build stuff might not be their forte. Now, CTO had a little ego. How do you work around that? Maybe you get a chief product officer who's in charge of the product line. And so CTO just deals with the code base. Product officer deals with like developing products and managing the product, right? You just gotta like kind of shuffle things around to deal with potential personalities, deal with potential issues, right? So just you leverage some of that stuff to your advantage, right? So, marketing, right? Like you gotta have a marketer. It's just a college kid that you hired to run your TikTok for, $5 an hour or whatever, right? Like minimum wage. Sorry, not $5. Never done $5, I swear. Minimum wage.
Unpaid intern.
Yes.
Free labor.
They just happened to show up at my office and they hacked my TikTok or something. So like, all right, you had that person, but then it's like, okay, maybe we need to have a more coherent marketing strategy. Is the founder able to do that? And just hire a bunch of marketers to go do it? Is it, okay, no. Well, we really need someone else to go in here and do it. Hire in, okay, my responsibility is what the NPS score is, what is the, brand awareness score, like the surveys, or how much leads are you passing on over to your sales team. These are specific KPIs and metrics that you can track. I manage dictating that. How you do it, that is your responsibility. Elevated VP of marketing, CMO, whatever. right? So you can see how like that same principle, I just kind of moved it around to all of the different positions, right? And there's always priorities in your business on what you need. You need to build product. You might need to emphasize your engineering team. Oh, we need to actually make money. Okay, we need to invest more into our sales and marketing teams, right? Depending on what type of, it's B2C, need more marketing. B2B, more on sales. It just makes sense that way, right? Being able to be reactive to your business, right? I also say that like a lot of people overemphasize engineering a little bit too much, and it pains me as an engineer to say that, but really, adding more features does not generally have positive correlations to more money in the business. You just spent more money to not end up making money, right? When really it's more of sales and marketing, and like using sales and marketing to tell your engineering team what they need to build, right? That marketing knows what the engineering team is building, and then sales being like, oh, people, I hit resistance point here because we didn't have X, Y, or Z. Okay, engineering team, right? But really having a good marketing and sales organizations, something that companies always sorely lack, right? And then they chase afterwards to try to make up, right? And then the founders are like, oh my God, my whole life is just doing founder-led sales or founder-led marketing or whatever. And I'm like, because you decided to hire 5 engineers and only 1 salesperson. Of course you're going to be selling a lot, right? So be mindful when you're planning that type of stuff. Cool. Any questions on team composition? Awesome. So I just kind of went through like a very guided, like thought process experiment-ish thing there, just because like it's hard to just be like, oh, I'm just going to assume X, Y, and Z thing, right? I think the last point that I'll make is the concept of direct reports. So direct reports is someone who they report to you, right? They are a direct report because there's no one in between you and them. If you have a VP of sales, they're your direct reports. The downstream salespeople directly report to the VP of sales. They are no longer your direct reports. Maybe at the early stage, if they just communicate with you, you tell them what their KPI metrics are that they're being judged on, and then they report to you how they're going to do it, and you approve it. They're your direct reports. When you add in that VP of sales, they're no longer your direct reports. There are famous examples of how you might want to strategize what the direct reports strategy is. Some people like to say that we run a very flat organization, right? Meaning that there's the executive level and there's everybody, and there's nothing in between, right? More onerous on executives. You might have more executives, right? Who all end up either direct reporting to you, right? Or you literally don't have executives. It's just you at the top, and you just communicate with everyone, right? That's obviously the most extreme version. The other way is you start getting into super corporate, where you have CEO at the top, VP of a department, and then the VP has their team leader, and the team leader has their little teams, and then they have functional teams underneath there who also have their own team leaders. And then under the team, there's projects. So they have a project manager, and you start divvying up. Obviously, that's the extreme in the other direction, right? There's no right answer, again, because it's dependent on who you have on your staff and what your company culture is like and how you best work. If you can't deal with a lot of people shoulder poking you and needing that conversation, you need to add someone to manage it, right? And a lot of people will poo-poo on the fact that, oh my God, you added in this manager who deals with X, Y, and Z thing, you should just do that. I'm like, no, everyone's different. Some people need deep work, right? And they can't deal with problem here, problem there, problem everywhere. So thus you take a little bit less financial upside to hire someone who will then manage it, And then the obvious problem that you then have to be concerned about is that you're going too far, right? You hire too many managers. One manager manages one employee. It's like the extreme example, right? Right? There's obviously a good number, and it's something to be aware of, right? And so when you start thinking about these team compositions and how you build your hierarchy, right? Think about that. And each person that you hire, what is their kind of load capacity of people that they can manage before you add in another thing? And know that when you add another thing, you are farther away and are less reactive to stuff from a top-down leadership perspective. And then the person at the bottom, right? If communication is a big part of your brand tenets, know that a person at the bottom, if they see that there's 2 steps before they get to you, they're not going to talk to you. They're going to be scared to talk to you because they'd rather talk to any of the other people up before the totem pole, right? So be diligent about that. There is no right answers. There's certainly like wrong answers at the extremes, but as long as the business is working and functioning and you're aware of that and you hire people who fit in that way, look, you might have one person who's a rock star at like managing people. They can manage 20 people and they have a 20-person team. Then you also have another person who has 5 people because that's all they can really manage. Both people can output the same amount. Right? What does that tell you? Well, you technically, from a business owner perspective, you want less labor costs, right? So maybe that one person who manages 20 people, you have to wonder, they have to produce extra output, right? Obviously in proportion to the smaller team, so on and so forth, right? So make that right what it is, and then I guess the last point is engineering. It's a major pitfall that if you just hire more engineers, more engineering work gets done. It is a fallacy. It's not how it works. Adding more people to a problem does not solve the problem. Like for example, if I'm trying to unscrew a jar, a pickle jar, having 5 people try to unscrew the same pickle jar does not make it easier, right? Maybe 1 or 2, like I gave it to someone else and they're able to do it, or their strengths combined, but then at some point there are too many hands on, right? And then like no one's doing anything at the top, right? This works in the same way, right? If you just add engineers, you're gonna have more meetings about like, you're just gonna create like a bunch of situations where engineers are like, I wanna do this. No, but I'm gonna do this. Well, let me check in with Bob, Joe, and Sally to make sure that I can do this. Did they touch this part? I don't know. Let's have another meeting to like make sure, right? Because communication gets so snarled at some point, right? Mm-hmm. So just want to let you know, like a lot of people, like especially PMs and other like people who have been hired from like corporate, right? If they used to work at like a FANG, they're flexing on their resume that, oh my God, I built up an organization of 300 people, right? When really like 50 of them are remote and like hang on one Zoom call a day, and then that's it, and the company still pays them all the full amount, right? But hey, the PM got to say that they got 300 employees that they were managing. You gotta be super careful about that type of stuff, right? Because like it's how you align the incentives in your company, right? If you as a CEO are super proud of having a high headcount because that's what you share, like to TechCrunch, like, oh my God, this company now has 500 employees, I'm so happy. Well, what type of culture are you creating for that company? That PM should just hire more people, right? Is it useful? Is it efficient? Probably not. So that is important there. Any questions on team composition?
What's your opinion on having a C-suite company versus one C and everybody's VP?
That is a personal question that
deals
deals with what people want to be labeled. Now, my personal rule of thumb is that VPs are generally people who are hired out in the early stage as a company. Like if you hired on a VP of sales or a VP of marketing, it's to denote that they are not the co-founder, co-founding team.
Right, right.
They were someone that's hired on to manage
Got it.
the functional department, right?
That's fair.
But though, like someone may have a CTO and then hire a VP of engineering. You know, why is that? Let's say, for example, you are creating some specialized piece of technology.
Yeah.
You have the CTO who manages technology. The engineer is to manage all of the engineers. VP of engineering might report to the CTO, or they might report directly to the CEO. Depends. Depends on how it works. Is the CTO able to manage the VP of engineering? Do you care about having, 3 degrees of separation away from your line engineers? Don't know. If you're a technical CEO, you might want to talk more with your engineers, right? Because then if there's a spot problem, you can be reactive. You don't hear it from 2 other people that there is a problem. You just know. But hey, maybe you're not a technical person. The fact that you are, talking with engineers just confuses them because you don't know what they're doing. You don't understand it. Maybe you add those degrees of separation because they don't come to you. They go to the other 2 people who have been hired and are part of the founding team that are more knowledgeable about this stuff. You create those separations intentionally.
Got it.
Company design is really important. I don't think it gets talked about enough about these things because you could provide SOPs to then tell someone how to do it, or you do it implicitly, right? Don't come to the CEO to talk about this stuff because there's two there's 2 people in between. That should give someone a hint, right? Or if it's you and then someone that manages them, okay, maybe that's a little bit closer so they feel a little bit more comfortable going to you. Degrees of separation. Because look, if you're a non-technical CEO and the engineers feel comfortable coming up to talk to you about random problems that they have, but you don't have solutions to them, what does that make you look like to the engineers? Makes you look bad, right? It's just facts, right? And then they're gonna stop communicating with you, or they're gonna badmouth you, or when you make a mistake, because inevitably you're gonna make a mistake, and be like, this dumb blah 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 doesn't know anything about technology, or they told us to go build this thing. It's so important with being able to structure how you build your company to be reactive to those type of things. And look, it's a lot of touch, feel, and understanding, and all that type of stuff. There's a lot of nuance, but that's why it's so important, right? And I think it's just a skill that gets built up over time that you'll figure out. But just being able to be diligent in being understanding when I'm doing the structures, what are the downstream effects, and am I building in processes implicitly in how I'm building the team structure, who reports to who, et cetera, Cool. Awesome. Any last things about team composition? Awesome. It's really important things. That's why I wanted to really harp on. Recruiting. So we probably don't have enough time to do a job description workshop, but just thinking about in terms of recruiting, the adage is that founders are always recruiting. That you are always evaluating people and being they already work somewhere, but in the future, they could be working here, right?
Yep.
And honestly, for me personally, I evaluate everyone as potential co-founders, potential employees. That guy who's super nice to me at McDonald's, could grab him. I don't know. I don't know what, they could be a college student working on their thing. They just happen to be working at McDonald's, right? I don't look down on it. I'm just man, this guy's got good energy and I like what he's about. I've done that before, not McDonald's, but other stores, right? Where I'm man, this person's a good salesperson. Keep an eye, Not connect on LinkedIn, but I'm oh, okay. I know what the vibe of a good person is, right? And I'm always recruiting for a lot of different things, right? Podcast, I'm recruiting certain people for podcasts. I'm you are a very charismatic person. I'd love to build a podcast with you. Cool. It's just reps too. Getting into the habit of doing that with things that may or may not matter, right? So, always be recruiting about that stuff. There are positions where people like hire on someone to actively do that. And it's a little bit later stage, but that's definitely an option for it. Your company values is something that your recruiter, when they go look for candidates, clues in on. That's why it's so important to have it clearly written and defined so that when you have a recruiter either work with your company or you hire someone who's going to be doing it, that they know what you're looking for. So that's so important. These things build on top of each other, right? Company values, they get given to a recruiter, they're like, great, is this person respectful? Does this person seem to have integrity? Does this person have honor? Great. They pass that, right? And there's more, obviously they're gonna be competent in what they're, not just competent, but like the best, right? Or that's like, it's also part of your company culture, right? Is your value excellency? Like, people talk about like hiring A+ people. Most people just settle. Like, no company's ever going to say, like, I don't hire A+ people. But some people actually do it, and some people don't, right? It's a big difference, right? And, another last bit about recruiting is being able to know enough about each job is the role of whoever is doing the hiring needs to understand what, like, that person's output needs to look like, what their job function needs to look like, right? And like, what is the ideal person for it is. So that's why when you go out to networking, you figure out like who is the best in that, right? And be able to understand it and learn it enough so that then you can judge someone in the hiring process or when they do their work. Cool. Any questions on recruiting? Cool. So job description workshop, we don't have enough time for this. The trick that I often tell people is LinkedIn, Indeed, Glassdoor. There's so many job descriptions out there, right? And you see, that's why the company values are always, there's a long-winded paragraph where people write about that type of stuff, right? The company story and whatever, right? Like, just look for stuff that you like, that you can adopt. Someone has been paid already to do it. Use the free labor. Do some research. Grab the stuff that you want. Make sure that like you don't just copy everything verbatim in terms of like the skills and the roles and responsibilities and that type of stuff. Like, be thoughtful about it. And then like technology, obviously, like what the skills are, like lean on your existing people to be able to figure that type of stuff out, right? Or, and this is big for leadership, right? The ability to reorient your company if needed. Like, when I build a piece of technology nowadays, like I'm actually building like a website to do like something, another startup. Like, I build it now with my own capabilities, knowing that in the future I might hire on a CTO, and in the interview process, I'm going to ask them, hey, if you were to start from scratch, how would you actually build this? Because I'm going to make them build it from scratch again in the way that works best for them. And I'm willing to do it, right? Because it's early, and like we'll have like 5 customers, they'll use the existing thing, he'll build a new thing for the next 1,000 customers. But I gotta know enough to be able to judge what they're saying and understand it, right? So whether that's finding mentors in a particular place that can help explain to you how they do a certain thing, what are their opinions, getting a range of opinions, right? Just being in it enough to understand it. And that's just the role of whoever is in charge of hiring needs to understand it enough. And like, it's totally different from corporate hiring, because corporate hiring is, what are your needs in your current team to do the things that you do? Someone's giving me a budget, I'm just going to hire it so they can do what I need them to get done. Co-founder or startup is a little bit different because they can dictate more things because things aren't set in stone. How we do things, there's not much legacy baggage. We can just do old product, that's version 1, work on version 2 with you. What does that look like? And then hiring on a team to be able to do that. So job descriptions, big nuances there, right? And the ability to be able to like judge all these different types of things, important. Cool. So we're not going to do that, but if you do need any help on job descriptions, like I can do a deep dive with you offline. There's a workshop about interviewing candidates, but I don't think we have enough time for that. I'm sure how many people in this room have actually interviewed someone before? Okay, so you have?
Oh, everyone.
Yeah, it's all right. So like, it's hard because I think there's more resources for the interviewee side as opposed to the interviewer side, right? Which makes sense. More people are looking for jobs than people are necessarily hiring, right? The main gist of what I would say about like interviewing candidates, right, is to understand that they're nervous, they're scared, and there's a major power imbalance that's going on, right? I think that oftentimes the best way that I've seen from both me interviewing people and other is like you can see it from either the positive end where you're trying to see what the best of this person is and then like be like, okay, does that align with what I need? Because I'm just trying to draw out what is this person actually good at, right? As opposed to the negative side where you're looking for deficiencies. Or is this person bad at, and can I tolerate the fact that they're bad at this? My opinion is probably that you do both. That you need to know what these people are deficient in, but then you also need to know what their strengths are, right? And it's an alignment. This is what our company needs are. Are these person's strengths able to cover that? Yes or no? And then, these are the things that they're bad at. Do those align with the things that we need? If they're bad at the things that we need, I'm sorry, it's not useful for them to be here, right? So those are just different conversations there. Probably, as I've gone on, I probably leaned more of like, let's triple down on what they're good at and not worry too much about what they're bad at, right? Because as long as what they're super good at aligns with what we need, that's all that really matters. Because I'm not going to have them do the things that they're doing, right? But, like in startups, everyone does everything. So that one time when you need someone to do something and they're bad at it, right? Something to keep in mind. So that's why it's like, I'd say it's more of like a, 70-30. Maybe that number changes depending on the job role. Light. Yeah.
Let there be light.
All right, cool. So, unfortunately, due to time, we don't have, not able to do that, but,
When did
That's okay. We can do it during the week, right? Oh, yeah.
who's that?
Yes, we can do it during the week, right?
We can either do that during the week, or we can do it now.
Do you want to do that? Do you have
We can work that.
I have time. I'm a little lost, but thank you.
Cool.
We can spend half an hour for
Okay, very nice.
Do you guys want to do it now?
KPIs. We can do now, right?
Okay.
KPIs.
Well, let me
Yeah.
turn this off, and then so like everyone can hang out in this room. We'll just go into one of the side rooms to like do the KPI meeting. And then, is there anybody who